Chapter 3. Expecting. Section 1. Jennifer had exaggerated somewhat. The animal in question was only a docile young bullock. Dr. Newton and the young people didn't have too much trouble in getting it out of the garden. While they were engaged in this task, Mrs. Newton telephoned Mr. Eldridge, the farmer who owned the bullock, and asked him if he would mind coming round to collect it. In no time at all, Mr. Eldridge and his son arrived on the scene in a truck. The Newtons all helped them to load the animal onto it, and very soon order was restored. On Sunday, Dr. Newton and Arthur had to work in the garden again after all. So it was a very tired Arthur who returned to London with Mary and Jennifer. He slept for most of the journey and had to be woken up on their arrival at Victoria Coach Station. The following morning he was still exhausted, but managed to crawl out of bed and get himself to work on time. He had a hectic day at the office. The telephone never stopped ringing, and he was only able to snatch a quick cheese roll at lunchtime. On the way home in the evening, he called in at the local for a pint and a chat, and arrived home slightly later than usual. Much to his surprise, he found that Mary wasn't at home. He found a note saying, "Gone out for a short while, dinner in oven, back soon." As he was trying to take his dinner out of the oven without burning his fingers, Mary walked in.
Hello, darling. Dinner all right?
Oh, hello. Well, the vegetables are a bit dried up. The meat's okay, I suppose. Where have you been, then?
Oh, I've just been to see somebody, you know.
Oh? Anybody I know?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've been to the doctor's.
The doctor's? You didn't say anything about feeling unwell. What's the matter?
Nothing.
Come on, out with it. What did you have to go and see him for?
Oh, nothing at all, really. Just a routine checkup.
That sounds a bit peculiar to me. Sure you haven't been somewhere else you don't want to tell me about?
No, I really have been to the doctor's. And there was a good reason for it.
Oh, well, I suppose you'll tell me about it in your own good time. I say, look at the time. There's a play on the box I want to watch. Coming?
Well, no, actually. There is something I've got to tell you.
Well, let's have it then. I don't want to miss the start of the play.
Well, it looks like you're going to be a father.
Section 2. This passage is taken from a piece of humorous writing called No Honestly, by Charlotte Bingham.
Actually, the best way to keep cheerful when you're having a baby is never to look at yourself sideways. This is the crux of the matter. If you can get through 9 months without ever looking sideways, you'll keep smiling. It's much easier to say than to do. I mean, you mightn't feel tempted to spend hours looking sideways at yourself when you're at home, but when you're trotting along the road and there's a breeze blowing and you catch sight of yourself in a shop window, you can suddenly feel very distressed. Just for a moment, it doesn't seem possible for anyone to be that shape and human. And it's no good people telling you that in Italy you'd be treated like a sacred cow. That doesn't help one bit, because in England you're treated like the noun without the adjective. I mean, to be openly pregnant in public is an offence. It's as if no one else had been born that way, or that you're some sort of freak. People in shops make remarks and stare at your hand to see if you've got a nice gold band on. Old ladies are the worst. They can't wait to slam swing doors on your stomach and bash you with their handbags, because to them you are a blatant example of someone who's had sex and doesn't mind who knows it. Sometimes I used to wish I'd been one of those people who won't have babies because of the atom bomb. Not when I was out with my husband and he was rushing up and down baby departments trying out the gears on prams as if they were Jensens, but when I was sitting in a heap at parties watching sticky, thin girls, or when I got one of those I'll never be free again days on. Actually, they were brought about by going to see someone who actually had a baby. There is nothing worse when you're about to give birth than going to see someone who just has. By the time they've finished removing the nappies from your cup of tea, you feel like running out and throwing yourself under a train.
Oral Practice 1. Practice saying these sentences from the dialogue.
You know. See somebody, you know. Oh, I've just been to see somebody, you know. To the doctor's. I've been to the doctor's. As a matter of fact, I've been to the doctor's.
Tell me about. You don't want to tell me about. Somewhere else you don't want to tell me about. Sure you haven't been somewhere else you don't want to tell me about? Good time. In your own good time. Tell me about it in your own good time. You'll tell me about it in your own good time. I suppose you'll tell me about it in your own good time.
To tell you. I've got to tell you. There is something I've got to tell you.
Oral Practice 2. Listen to the dialogue and then take the part of the doctor.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Evans. Do take a seat. How are you keeping then?
Oh, very well, thank you, Doctor. Apart from feeling a little sick in the morning, I feel as right as rain.
Let's see now. Have I sent you for a blood test yet?
Oh, yes, Doctor. I went for that last week. They said they'd send you the result.
Oh, yes. Here it is. Good. There's nothing to worry about as far as that's concerned.
One thing I'd like to ask you. When do you think I ought to give up my job?
Well, that depends on what you do, really. You did tell me what your job was, but I must confess I've forgotten.
Well, I work in a bookshop.
Oh, then you probably spend quite a lot of time on your feet, I suppose.
Yes, I do, rather.
Well, in that case, you can carry on for the present, but if you get any swelling of the ankles or backache, I should tell them that you'll have to leave at least until after the baby's born.
Now, wind the tape back to the beginning of this dialogue, and this time, speak at the same time as the doctor. Remember that the doctor speaks first. Now, here's the dialogue again, and this time, you take the part of the doctor. Begin now.
Oh, very well, thank you, Doctor. Apart from feeling a little sick in the morning, I feel as right as rain. Yes, Doctor. I went for that last week. They said they'd send you the result. One thing I'd like to ask you. When do you think I ought to give up my job? Well, I work in a bookshop. Yes, I do, rather.
Oral Practice 3. Listen to Michael Coles talking to Angela Ayton about her experiences and feelings when she was pregnant. Then, answer the questions in your book.
Angela, when you first discovered you were pregnant, what did you feel about it?
I think my first reaction to it was the fact that I was very scared. I thought, my goodness, what have we done now? It wasn't that I wasn't pleased. I was quite pleased to be pregnant. But I thought once the baby arrives, then we're going to have it for the next 16 years. And it was the longest sort of decision that I'd ever made. And so, as I said, first I really was quite frightened about it. But later, quite soon after that, I began to feel much more excited. It's quite interesting being pregnant, in fact. It's something very new that happens to you. I sort of went and got all kinds of books out of the library because I'm the sort of person that tends to like to read about things.
Yes, did you hear any particularly interesting anecdote about what had happened to anybody when they were pregnant?
Well, quite a funny thing happened to my friend Chris. One of the things that happens to you when you're pregnant is that you get very absent-minded. You tend to forget things. You just... and she'd been learning to drive, and she was taking her driving test. And another thing that happens to you when you're pregnant, as well as getting absent-minded, is you get terribly hungry. All the time you feel absolutely ravenous. And she went along to take her driving test. And, you always have to wait in a waiting room before the examiner comes out. And so she'd taken some fruit along with her to eat while she was waiting. And she'd been eating a banana. And then when someone came to the door who she realized was her examiner, she threw the banana skin away, ready to take her test. Only she didn't throw the banana skin away. Instead, she threw her car keys away and kept hold of the banana skin. So when the examiner came out, poor Chris was sort of about 7 months pregnant with his enormous stomach, was sort of scrabbling over the waste paper bin in the corner of the examining room, saying, "I've lost my car keys." And the examiner roared with laughter and thought it was terribly funny. And in fact passed her, and Chris reckoned it was only because he was laughing so much at the beginning of the test that he didn't really notice how she was driving.
Yes, that was amusing, wasn't it? Now, did anything interesting happen to you when you were pregnant?
I can remember embarrassing things that happened. Another thing that happens when it seems to happen to a lot of people when they're pregnant, is you get very over-emotional about things, and you tend to overreact to situations. And we went on holiday during the summer when I was about 6 months pregnant, I suppose. And we were staying in Paris with a friend of ours called Henry, who's an art historian. Most of the time, in fact, he's an out-of-work art historian. And he wanted to go to a lecture one afternoon at the Academy. And I really didn't want to go to it. I felt very tired, and it was very hot, and all I wanted to do was sit at home and put my feet up. But in the end, Mike persuaded me that perhaps we ought to go along to keep Henry happy. So we went along to this lecture, and by the time I got there, I felt very tired and very fed up. And I sat down in this lecture theatre, and I just burst into tears. I felt very embarrassed about it, because poor Henry hadn't really wanted us to go so much as that. And I didn't really mind so much as all that. But I just found that I was sitting there crying and crying.
Oral Practice 4. Expressing possible conditions. Listen to the examples first.
People who go to France enjoy the food.
Yes, if you went to France, you'd enjoy the food too.
Yes, if you went to France, you'd enjoy the food too.
People who drive carelessly don't live very long.
Yes, if you drove carelessly, you wouldn't live very long either.
Yes, if you drove carelessly, you wouldn't live very long either.
Now you go on in the same way.
People who go to France enjoy the food.
Yes, if you went to France, you'd enjoy the food too.
People who drive carelessly don't live very long.
Yes, if you drove carelessly, you wouldn't live very long either.
People who speak 2 or 3 languages can get interesting work.
Yes, if you spoke 2 or 3 languages, you'd get interesting work too.
People who don't take any exercise get fat.
Yes, if you didn't take any exercise, you'd get fat too.
People who do interesting work don't get bored.
Yes, if you did interesting work, you wouldn't get bored either.
People who grow their own vegetables don't have to spend any money at the greengrocer's.
Yes, if you grew your own vegetables, you wouldn't have to spend money at the greengrocer's either.
People who use Colgate toothpaste have white teeth.
Yes, if you used Colgate toothpaste, you'd have white teeth too.
People who don't smoke don't cough.
Yes, if you didn't smoke, you wouldn't cough either.
That's the end of Oral Practice 4. Oral Practice 5. Expressing hypothetical conditions. Listen to the examples first. Mr. Murphy won the pools. He's got a yacht now.
If I won the pools, I'd have a yacht too.
If I won the pools, I'd have a yacht too.
Jane's father's a millionaire. She doesn't worry about money.
If my father were a millionaire, I wouldn't worry about money either.
If my father were a millionaire, I wouldn't worry about money either.
Now you go on. Mr. Murphy won the pools. He's got a yacht now.
If I won the pools, I'd have a yacht too.
Jane's father's a millionaire. She doesn't worry about money.
If my father were a millionaire, I wouldn't worry about money either.
Jane's slim. She can wear trouser suits.
If I were slim, I could wear trouser suits too.
John's young. He can run fast.
If I were young, I could run fast too.
Fred's clever. He passes all his exams.
If I were clever, I'd pass all my exams too.
Jack lives in the country. He doesn't go to the cinema.
If I lived in the country, I wouldn't go to the cinema either.
Molly plays tennis. She's very fit.
If I played tennis, I'd be very fit too.
Pierre doesn't speak English. He isn't able to do this drill.
If I didn't speak English, I wouldn't be able to do this drill either.
That's the end of Oral Practice 5. Oral Practice 6. In this drill, you must say what cannot be true and what must be true. Look at the pictures in your book and listen to the examples.
Do you think she's married or single?
She can't be single. She must be married.
She can't be single. She must be married.
Do you think he's been to the fishmongers or the barbers?
He can't have been to the barbers. He must have been to the fishmongers.
He can't have been to the barbers. He must have been to the fishmongers.
Now, you go on in the same way.
Do you think she's married or single?
She can't be single. She must be married.
Do you think he's been to the fishmongers or the barbers?
He can't have been to the barbers. He must have been to the fishmongers.
Do you think he's a painter or a dentist?
He can't be a dentist. He must be a painter.
Do you think this is London or Hong Kong?
It can't be London. It must be Hong Kong.
Do you think they've been to Egypt or Switzerland?
They can't have been to Switzerland. They must have been to Egypt.
Do you think he did his homework last night, or did he go to the cinema?
He can't have done his homework. He must have been to the cinema.
Do you think he's English or Scottish?
He can't be English. He must be Scottish.
Do you think he came by car or on a motorcycle?
He can't have come by car. He must have come on a motorcycle.
That's the end of Oral Practice 6. Oral Practice 7. Dictation. First, cover up the passage and listen, please. When my wife was expecting a baby last year, things went on fairly normally in our household. She's a very healthy woman, and after she had undergone all the tests at the hospital, our doctor told her that there were no complications at all, and that she could continue working until a month or so before the baby was due. There was, however, one difficulty. During practically the whole 9 months, she couldn't stop eating chocolates. She used to eat them before breakfast in the morning, all afternoon and evening, and sometimes even in the middle of the night. If she ran out of supplies in the evening, I was obliged to go out and look for a shop where I could get some more. We were very glad when the baby was born and she returned to a normal diet. Now you'll hear the passage again. And this time you must write down what you hear. When my wife was expecting a baby last year, things went on fairly normally in our household. She is a very healthy woman, and after she had undergone all the tests at the hospital, our doctor told her that there were no complications at all. And that she could continue working until a month or so before the baby was due. There was, however, one difficulty. During practically the whole 9 months, she couldn't stop eating chocolates. She used to eat them before breakfast, in the morning, all afternoon and evening, and sometimes even in the middle of the night. If she ran out of supplies in the evening, I was obliged to go out and look for a shop where I could get some more. We were very glad when the baby was born, and she returned to a normal diet. Now, here's the passage again. When my wife was expecting a baby last year, things went on fairly normally in our household. She is a very healthy woman, and after she had undergone all the tests at the hospital, our doctor told her that there were no complications at all, and that she could continue working until a month or so before the baby was due. There was, however, one difficulty. During practically the whole 9 months, she couldn't stop eating chocolates. She used to eat them before breakfast in the morning, all afternoon and evening, and sometimes even in the middle of the night. If she ran out of supplies in the evening, I was obliged to go out and look for a shop where I could get some more. We were very glad when the baby was born, and she returned to a normal diet. Now, check the dictation in your book. That's the end of Chapter 3.